All right. All right, Joe. Good to see you, man. How you been?
Good to see you, Mike. Doing
Yeah.
great. Just waiting for hockey season to start. Writing about Bruins. There's not much going on with hockey, but coaching my son's mites team. It's his first
Nice.
year playing mites, so the free time with the Bruins not playing in the NHL going on right now, where I might not have it to coach youth hockey, I've been able to do that. So all in all, going pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one thing during the pandemic, it has given us time to do a lot of things, especially for those in sports, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have all that. We're usually obsessed with sports, the games. Our lives are completely wrapped around it. Now we've got all this extra family time. We got to figure out what to do with it. You do appreciate it, right? Though, like at the height of things, when you're around a professional sports team that's playing, and I know it's even more so for baseball, where like your whole day is dominated if there's a game going on,
Yeah.
for a long stretch. With hockey, it's not quite as intense, but still, it's a long season and you don't get to do as much as you'd like to do. And having all this free time to play games, quality time with your family, like pick out hobbies. Like I've found myself with free time to do hobbies and, look into stuff more than I have before and go down rabbit holes like buying things that I
Yeah.
never have before, like all of that stuff. It's interesting what you do with your free time when you have it.
Yeah. For those watching on YouTube, I really like the poster in the background.
Oh, thank you.
Just
We got Star Wars over here. We've
nice.
got a Massachusetts license plates. I'm not even sure if they legally obtain those license plates or not. Ask any questions, and that's me
Oh,
rappelling
nice.
down the side of the Grand Hyatt in Boston to raise money for the Special Olympics. So
Oh, cool.
we got some fun stuff on the wall.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I'm happy that you landed on your feet. The website Boston Hockey Now is terrific too, right? When you go on it, you just see all that black and gold. But I'm happy that during the pandemic you were able to land something nice.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I was too, and I knew things ended very amicably with NBC Sports Boston. I was there for 11 years. It was a great run. I had nothing but, gratitude and appreciation for all the great stuff that came my way over those 11 years. But I had still covered the Bruins, and you remember I was covering the Red Sox too.
Yeah.
I was doing that for 6, 7 years before I got hired by NBC Sports Boston. So I had no intention of not covering the Bruins anymore. Certainly, I think my days covering the Red Sox are done, and I'm okay with that. Baseball's such an intense sport that you cover in the summertime, but I knew my days were not going to be done covering the Bruins, and it was just a matter of going to the next step and finding the next place. Boston Hockey Now is a fantastic landing spot. It's all things Bruins all the time. Myself and my partner in crime, Jimmy Murphy, who I've been friends with for almost 20 years. Now we're working together and covering the Bruins together, something we had always talked about doing before, but never had the chance to. So, like, really excited about that. And, the one thing about Boston Hockey Now, and I love so much about it, but the biggest thing about it is all of these sites, and there's one in Pittsburgh, Dan King Erskine, excuse me. He's the guy that started everything in Pittsburgh with Pittsburgh Hockey Now. There's
Okay.
one in Pittsburgh, there's one in San Jose, there's one in Long Island. There's a bunch of them around. There's one in Colorado, there's one in Vegas, and it's all hockey. Like
Yep.
that's all they care about. You don't have to share time with the basketball. You don't have to share time with the Patriots, which dominates everything in the New England sports scene. The Red Sox. This is all Bruins all the time and all hockey. And for me, that's music to my ears. That's all I want to talk about ever. So it's a great landing spot. I encourage people that haven't gone to BostonHockeyNow.com to go there and check it out.
Yeah, it's one of those ideas that seems obvious that was never done because I know people are overwhelmed now when they go to if they want a certain sport, they don't want to navigate through it.
Yep,
Now if they're a Bruin,
absolutely.
they can just get it. And I'm this, we blame younger people, but I'm just as bad
Oh yeah.
with
There's no
things.
there's no patience for it, right?
No,
You
no.
want to cut through everything and get to what you actually want to read. And the other part of it too is like with Murph and I in particular, and this, having been involved with the Sea Dogs and the Paw Sox and the Red Sox organization for a long time, that the longer somebody is covering the team, the organization, the more institutional knowledge they have and the more they
Sure.
bring to the table as far as analysis, what's really going on, kind of cutting through the bull crap and the spin and telling you exactly what's happening. And that's what we take our pride in doing at Boston Hockey Now. In our media, in all of the different sports, there's been so much turnover over the last 5 years just because of the business that there's a lot of younger people that haven't been on the beat as long that are
Yep.
covering these teams for other media outlets. So, any place like Boston Hockey Now that is going to value people that have been doing it a long time and people that give you a different level of knowledge because they've been there and they know all the players and they've been around for so long. I think you've got to have value in that. And, we appreciate all the people that subscribe to it and read it because they're supporting that kind of institutional knowledge that you might not get in other, shinier, brighter media outlets that are still out there.
Yeah. I don't think people understand, like, for your position, being a beat writer, you have to be fair to the listeners, to the view, to people reading. But I've always thought that you've done it right. And I know the players respect you. You have to go on TV and you have to say things, you go on talk shows. But you've always, one thing I admire about you, you stick your guns with things. I like when you get in it with some of the personalities because you also have to live with those guys in a way. And I know what that's like.
Yep.
You're more on the cusp where you're writing for the teams, you're not with the team, but there is that balance. And I've always thought you handled that well.
Oh yeah. That's it. That's the part that maybe people don't always understand.
Yeah.
When they're reading you, when they're listening to you talk on the radio or television, it is such a balancing act. Like, you want to have your opinions, you want to give them the truth and the straight analysis and tell them exactly what's going on. But there's definitely a level, like, whenever you're a beat writer, it's also about the relationships that you build with the players, with the executives, with the coaches, and that sort of delicate balancing act. But I'll tell you this, the one thing that all of those people respect and respond to is knowing that you're telling the truth and you're going to be upfront about it, and you're going to be accountable when you say or write or do something. If you say something critical, if you write something critical, the thing the players hate most is if you drop a bomb like that and then you disappear for 2 weeks. Like, you're just parachuting in, dropping bombs everywhere, and then you go on to your next thing, and you're not in the Bruins dressing room for a while. And that with the Bruins, that can happen fairly often because you will have columnists from the big boys that will come in, write a quick piece or a controversial piece, and then they'll be on to, going with the Red Sox on a road trip for 2 weeks or going to cover Patriots games. And you don't see them for a while.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing you earn over a long period of time is when you're there every single day and you're there. If they have a problem with you, you can go over and talk to them about it. And, I've had plenty of run-ins when it comes to that. And it's always respectful, and you have a dialogue, and then you move on. And that's the way it works. I mean, I can remember Bruins wise, I can remember Sean Thornton and like threatening to break my arm or leg or whatever it was. And we had a good relationship. So there was some level of joking to it. It wasn't completely serious, but he had a tone when he said it. So I knew he meant business and that he was pissed about something that I think I had said something on the air that he didn't like. And so he gave it back to me. I mentioned he had an injury, and he was disputing that he had the injury, and he said, well, maybe I'll give you that injury. And I was like, okay, you know what I mean? But you go back and forth. I remember, you may remember this, when I was with the Red Sox and I reported on John Lackey. And remember when he was in, I forget where it was, but he was, he had stuffed a few beers down his pocket when he was walking out of the clubhouse. In Cleveland, and they had lost like 5 out of 6. It was the Bobby Valentine year. They were circling down the drain. Like, they were in a bad way on that team. And it looked to me like, and I was just at that time, I was covering mostly the Bruins, and I was just covering the Red Sox for a few weeks at a time. But I'd covered the Red Sox for so many years, and I'd been on the road and all that. So I understood what it was supposed to look like, what it looked like under Grady Little and Francona, and now what it was looking like under Bobby Valentine. And it was clear to me, like, watching, the guys didn't care whether they were winning and losing. And Lackey was injured, wasn't even playing on that team, and was stuffing beers down his pocket like it was an open bar after the game was over to go back to the hotel. So I wrote something about that, not thinking much of it. And it created this big stir because of the I believe it was the chicken and beer thing that people talked about that had happened the year before. And that turned into the next day, this huge dressing room wide discussion between me, Dustin Pedroia, Josh Beckett, Carl Crawford. Like, it was the entire Red Sox dressing room that was basically coming at me, and we were having a back and forth about it. And I'll never forget, afterwards, David Ortiz pulled me aside and we had a conversation about it. And I was like, Poppy, you and I both know some of the stuff that's going on here right now shouldn't be happening and would have never happened under Tito. And he basically agreed with me, but he was trying to steady the ship and keep things right there.
Yeah.
But I totally remember that clear as day as one of those times where it was just this complete, like, just crap storm of stuff that we were talking on the beat. And, that kind of stuff happens all the time. And they don't teach you in journalism class how to deal with stuff like that. That's more of like a real world sort of navigational thing. And having experiences of going through that, having discussions with players that are pissed off at you, like figuring out ways to come to some kind of a, detente with issues like that when players are really mad about something you've done, it gives you a world of experience on how to deal with that moving forward. And there were so many things on the Red Sox beat because it's so intense, because there's so many reporters, because like Yankees Red Sox is crazy, the amount of people that are there and what you're dealing with. And it's like a spectacle to itself, especially in the era that I covered when it was, 03 to 2010, 2011, when, Red Sox were huge and they were basically rock stars. That particular experience gave me so much that I was able to use in covering the Bruins as well, and just day-to-day journalism. It's amazing. But to young journalists out there, you don't get that from going to being a communications major, writing for your college newspaper, majoring in journalism, whatever. You get that when you actually go out and cover the beat and deal with these day-to-day situations, because there is nothing that prepares you for walking into the Red Sox clubhouse or the Bruins dressing room for the first time and seeing all the guys that you used to watch on TV and now they're up close and personal and right in your face. And I'm sure you can relate to that too. Like, it takes a little while to get over the surreal feeling of like covering the people that you used to watch on TV as a huge sports fan.
Yeah, then that's great stuff. Bob McElligott, of course, right?
Yeah.
The blue. So Bob's my best friend, mentor. He got me into baseball. I interned for him in '97. That's how I got into this. He taught me right off the bat, you need to make yourself available. So I didn't know when I was doing Legion baseball before, but to what you're saying and to people that are young watching this, he taught me that you have to be, he showed me how that you have to be able to talk to the guys and that you got to do this, but you're right. And it's a balancing act. But I think what you said though, being honest is the best policy, right?
It's Lester Bangs from Almost Famous, honest and unmerciful. That's really what you have to do and what you have to live by. And when you do that, like, the players pick up on it, they understand, and they respect that, and they get that that's what you're about. And as long as you're not trying to make a spectacle of yourself and you're not writing stuff that's simply not true, or you just, screaming out for attention, the players know. They know when they don't play well. They know when they deserve criticism. Like, especially hockey, they're as accountable as you get as far as professional athletes go. So they're not going to have a problem as long as what you're writing is truthful. And that's always what you go for. And above and beyond that, you and I both know, Mike, being from New England, that New England sports fans don't buy into the bull crap either. No. They can see right through somebody that's just a carnival barker looking for attention, or somebody that's, looking to, have hot takes and doesn't really ground it in anything substantial. They get that and they move on and they ignore it. You have to have truth at the beginning and end of everything you do. I remember I was the first one on the Bruins beat that started talking about Claude Julien getting fired. And I hated talking about it because I love Claude. He's an awesome guy, always treated me great human being, best coach the Bruins have ever had in their history. But I had known from what I had heard within the organization, from what I was watching on the ice, from the circumstances of what was going on, that he was in trouble and they probably wasn't going to make it through the year. And I guess I was the only one that knew that, because everybody else was saying, you can't fire Claude. Who else are you going to hire? Like, you can't make that kind of move. Like, what's going to, that's ridiculous. Whereas I knew it wasn't. And I knew, Bruce Cassidy was put on that coaching staff at the start of the year, ostensibly to replace Claude when they decided to make the move and fire him. It wasn't just for show and decoration. That was the first year he was on that staff after being in Providence with the Providence Bruins all those years before. So, it ended up happening, and it made it seem like I, knew something that everybody else didn't. But like, when you have stuff like that, information like that, and you have instincts, like I said, where you've been doing it so long, you can kind of look at things and say, okay, I can see what's going on here, and I see the pieces falling into place, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You use all of that stuff together when you report and when you analyze things, and you come to conclusions like that, like I did with Claude. And by the time it actually happened, people seemed to be starting to wake up that was what was going on. And it was a difficult decision. It was not something the Bruins did easily, because Claude won them a cup and he was awesome there for a decade. but it was something that had to happen, and that's part of the truth telling in sports and the cold hard business aspect of professional sports.
Yeah. I think that we definitely in the NFL with coaches, there's definitely value there. I think that what they do is huge. But with hockey, it's sometimes not talked about how important a coach is. You know, baseball, they kind of they call the manager because they manage a clubhouse. We know. I mean, X's and
Yep.
O's. I think many can do that, but
Well,
there is
especially in this day and age, right? With
sure, yeah,
baseball, it's like the front office with the analytics. They're basically like
computer,
calling everything.
yeah,
Yeah. You know, every move down to X, Y, and Z is mapped out for the manager, a lot of them anyway. It seems like it's becoming less of a manager dominant sport all the time.
yeah. No, I mean, I remember when Josh Reddick went on a radio show and said that Billy Beane was making a lineup every day, which he played in Portland, so I like him, and I just
Yeah.
cringe like.
I like Reddick too. He was a free spirited guy.
Yeah, I mean it's true. I mean I know a lot of that does go on, but hockey coaches are, you know, I think we undervalue them. I mean they're huge. They're out there skating. You know, they're a big part of the team, and it shows even at the highest level how those guys need to be led.
Yeah, the interesting thing about hockey coaches, there's a couple of interesting things, but one of them is just that the personality definitely trickles down to the players
Sure.
and how they play. And you know, the thing with Claude was like he was an emotional guy, and he would ride the roller coaster of emotion more even so than the players would sometimes. And
Mm,
I think that sometimes manifested itself in the way that they played. Sometimes they would be very tight in big games, and I think that was kind of a trickle down from Claude. Sometimes they would get carried away with things. That was a trickle down from Claude. They would certainly play conservative a lot of the time. That was a trickle down from Claude. Like they, you know, the players tend to manifest a lot of the personalities of the coach.
yeah.
You know, but they also played very disciplined. They stuck to their systems. They didn't make a lot of mental mistakes on the ice. They would counterattack on other opponents' mistakes. Like they played a very smart game. It's a give and take, obviously, and it worked out for a long time. But you could see towards the end that Claude's conservative nature of play and his unwillingness sometimes to trust young players and to put a lot of trust in them, you know, became issues because the Bruins were sort of morphing into a more skilled team and a more draft and development team with young players, and that became a sort of a philosophical difference between the two. The other interesting thing about coaches in hockey is they're just the disposable nature of them.
Yeah.
Like we didn't see it here, and we haven't seen it in a while, honestly, because Claude was here for like a decade, won a cup. Bruce Cassidy has done a great job. He's been in the playoffs every year since he took over. Has won now a Jack Adams. You know, considered one of the best coaches in the league. So for the last 15 years, there hasn't been any turnover here, just once. 2 coaches in 15 years, pretty good. But you see in the NHL, I think even more than the other sports, that there's a high level of turnover and there's a disposable aspect to the hockey coaches. I think you see more in hockey than in other sports that coaches can get fired to spark a team, to change
Yep.
momentum. Like if a team's not going anywhere during a season. I don't know that you see that as much in the other sports, but you absolutely see it in hockey. And the other thing is, I think you see in hockey as much as any other sport, players start to tune out the coach after a while too. Like if they've been there too long, players decide, you know, let's say John Tortorella is a great coach, but he's well-traveled and he's been a bunch of different places because he asks his players to block tons of shots, to play hard, you know, to play a really painful, deliberate, old school style of hockey. Like players start to get tired of that after a couple of years, especially if they haven't won a cup, and they start to tune out and not listen to it or not play that way anymore. And you see that happen, I think, in hockey more than any other sport where that happens, and then you've got to make a move because the coach has kind of lost the dressing room. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of interesting dynamics between coaches and players and the way it works in the NHL. But, you know, I've considered myself extremely lucky. You know, Mike Sullivan was a pretty good guy. That was the first head coach when I covered the Bruins. I liked him. He was a very straightforward guy. He was a Marshfield guy. Dave Lewis was only here a year. It was a big mistake by Peter Chiarelli to hire him. He was a very nice guy. He was actually pretty funny, but it was clear that he just did not have the voice of the players in the dressing room. And then that led to Claude. Claude, fantastic guy, you know, knew us all really well. There was a lot of give and take. I remember, and I was thinking about this recently because Johnny Boychuk retired. He was like my all-time favorite player to cover, great personality, fun guy. Like we're friends away from the ice. I'll text him back and forth. You know, we keep in touch. And I remember when he got traded, the day he got traded, I had to go and do TV. It was a shocker. It was the end of the preseason. I think it was the last preseason game of the year. He was traded either before or during the game. I think it was before. He got traded to the Islanders for 2 second-round picks. And I'm usually down in the press conference room with Claude after the game is over. But sometimes I had to go do TV for NBC Sports Boston. So I had to do TV right after the game was over to talk about the Boychuk trade. So I wasn't in the dressing or in the press conference room afterwards when Claude talked about the game. First thing Claude said when everybody filed in for the press conference is he goes, "Oh, where's Haggerty? Is he off crying somewhere because his boy Boychuk just got traded? What's going on here?" And that's how he started the whole thing with the press conference, because everybody knew that Boychuk and I were pretty tight.
Yeah.
So Claude knew all the reporters and had built up a rapport with us and could do that kind of stuff over a period of time. And being around sports teams that when you get to that level as a coach or a manager, when you have a really good collegial relationship with the media like that, it just benefits everybody and it really works really well. And I think it's part of the reason so many more media people really stayed loyal to Claude to the very end, because he was so good to us and he was such a pleasure to deal with. And same with Bruce Cassidy. We talk about truth. That guy he's allergic to telling lies. He just physically, I think, is incapable of telling lies, which is a very difficult thing if you're a head coach.
Sure.
And you're out there transmitting the team's message to, give you the straight truth all the time and to just shy away from any level of deception whatsoever. But such a straight up guy, such an innovative coach, very creative. Will give you a great answer to any question you ask, loves the game of hockey. I consider myself really blessed to have dealt with the coaches that I've dealt with in this era, the Bruins, because there was a time you were dealing with high turnover, crazy stuff going on, whether it was, the Sutters, whether it was Pat Burns, Milbury, Terry O'Reilly, all of those guys that kind of shuffled through before we got to this era of, longevity with the coaches. I consider myself really lucky, not only in the Bruins to deal with the coaches I've dealt with, but to work with Tito for as long as I did with the Red Sox, who, had his things. He definitely didn't like it when your cell phone went off in his press conferences, and he would let you have it if it did. But he was another guy that was a great storyteller, would give you great answers. And you understood you were in the presence of a manager that really had his stuff together when you were working with him. It's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah. The guys that, if they bust on you too, that's a good sign, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It definitely is.
They
don't bust on nobody's bike.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'll tell myself. It's interesting though. I remember going to spring training in 2011 and there was something that was not right.
Oh yeah.
And I knew, and this is just, for people who are watching this, that might be fans, there is a feeling you can get they were already deemed the greatest team. And guys weren't guys weren't going an hour away to games. And I remember being this is not going to go. I mean, everyone knew.
Yep.
I think people saw that coming for a while.
Yep.
And then when it all that happened at the end of the year, and you just go back, because I've heard the opposite. I've heard guys saying spring training, they knew right away we were going to be a great team. And you think, why would spring training have anything to do with it? Then you realize those guys are together for what? 60 days. They get there now at the end of January.
Yep.
And if you just form that downward pattern, it's unfortunate what happened, but I think in the end it was probably good for Tito to get out of there, right?
Yeah, no, I think so. He needed a change. And look, he's in Cleveland now. That's exactly where he wanted to be. That's a dream job for him. His old man created a legacy there, and now he's following in his dad's footsteps, who he absolutely adored, would talk about all the time when he was managing the Red Sox. So it definitely worked out well for him. He's going to be a Hall of Famer for his managerial career. There's no question about it. And you're right. It definitely, you got a country club feeling, that year, things were definitely not right. And it was funny to me, even more, for me, it was stark the next year with Bobby V. I remember a few times, he would need to ask the media relations people next to him about injury updates for players and what was going on with players. And simple stuff like that a manager should know off the top of his head. He would ask, it was Pam Ganley a lot of times was there, great person, still works for the Red Sox, good Burlington girl. And he would be asking her like updates on the injured players. And I'm sitting there thinking, did you ever see Tito not know what was going on with an injured player and have to ask his media relations people like for updates and what's happening? Like, what is this guy doing? And you would never see him in the dressing room at all before or after a game. It was basically like he was holed up in his manager's office, and you would only see him like when the game was going on, and then you would go in there and talk to him post game, and then that was it, and he would disappear. And I don't know if like because he hadn't managed in a while, the game had passed him by. I don't know if he was used to that being the way it was way back when, but like it was so stark to me to go from like Tito for the duration of when he was with the Red Sox, and he was on top of everything and really had his finger on the pulse of everything that was going on, to a guy that was so far removed from it, he couldn't even tell you like what was going on with an injured pitcher in a rehab situation, which is, I think, the bare minimum that a manager or a head coach should know, when he's out there talking to the media every day. And I was just like, wow, this is really different. And this is above and beyond like Bobby Valentine trying to claim he like, started the wrap sandwich and like, revolutionized baseball and like the little egomaniacal trips he used to go on. This was just simple, like, are you doing the job that you were hired to do here stuff? And you knew they were in trouble at that point, even, before you got to some of the players in the clubhouse.
You think that was just, listen, we're going to hire, we just had the best manager, one of the best, if not the best in team history. We'll do the old bridge thing. I've always said that great coaches never take over for great coaches. You never saw Parcells take over. They don't want to be that. You want to come in after because it's, hey, you come in after. But they hired Farrell after that, which was someone they wanted. But
and I think Farrell was kind of a harkening back to Tito, right? He was a part of the Tito tree, and he had close ties to Francona in that era before. And I think they realized they strayed too far away from what had worked for them when they went with Farrell. I think part of it is what you're talking about. It was kind of a bridge situation, and I also think part of it was the decision was probably made in part because of the TV aspect of it. And they thought Bobby Valentine was going to be good on TV, give good press conferences, be somebody. Maybe they were afraid the team on the field wasn't going to be as good as they'd been in the past, and they needed something else to sort of distract from that or to entertain people. And they thought that Bobby Valentine would be able to do that because he was a good TV personality when he, worked for ESPN and analyzed the games and all that. And, I remember his time with the Mets where he dressed up in the disguise in the dugout when he got kicked out of the game and all that. And he had, that element of him too, that, you weren't sure what he was going to do down there. And, that might make it entertaining too. And I'm sure that all factored into it. But look, that was a huge, colossal mistake looking back on it in hindsight. And, it did lead to them blowing up that team and making some really significant trades and getting Josh Beckett out of there, getting Carl Crawford out of there, who didn't, really want to be with that, with the Reds, never, signed for the money, but clearly didn't ever want to be there. And Adrian Gonzalez too, like that guy, I still don't understand what was going on there. I
remember complaining about playing games at 8 o'clock. I mean,
well, I remember, wasn't it Beckett that talked about like, this was, I think, even before the season started, early in the season, he'd already counted all the off days that they had during the regular season. Like when you get to that level, it's like, all right, guys, are we here to win or are we here to like enjoy ourselves? What's going on?
Yeah. And you know what? The union actually negotiated more off days for them. But the dumb thing is they're starting earlier and they're losing a lot of those because of weather. So, what's
funny too is now Donald Fear is in charge of the NHLPA. He used to be in charge of the Major League Players Association. And you're seeing a lot of that stuff start to carry over into hockey now. Like when he came on board, one of the things that he did in the last CBA was have the NHL agree to give the players, at least I think it's 2 days a month, designated off away from the ice. They can't practice. So the players know ahead of time they can, schedule family events, do whatever they need to do, and they're not going to have to practice. And that was never a part of hockey anymore before. Like a hockey coach could always just punitively, if he didn't like the way the team was playing, say, you know what, you guys had an off day this day, but you're having an off day now. I want you to come. I want you to practice. I want you to skate because you're not playing well enough. And that was like a tool that the coaches always had to try to motivate the players. Well, Donald Fear came in and said, no, what we're going to do is we want all the teams to give you a month's notice that you guys are going to have this day off and this day off that month, and you cannot practice, you cannot do anything, and that is an off day that can't be changed. And I guess I suppose the players can agree to vote and practice even though it was a designated off day if they agree to do that. But like, what players are going to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so you can start to see things like that. And I remember the first couple of years, you could hear, especially with Claude, how pissed he was. He would like roll his eyes when he talked about like the negotiated CBA day off of the players, because the coaches were used to be able to having that like that ability to make them practice even if they didn't want to, or if they had previously promised them an off day. So you can see now some of that baseball mentality, some of that like union strength, some of the accoutrements that the baseball players are used to starting to transfer over to hockey, where it was never like that before. And that is totally an influence of Donald Fehr now leading the Players Association. It's good for the players.
Sure.
I mean, they're getting more benefits out of it. He's a fantastic advocate for the players. He's I think the best union head that they've had in the NHL, and certainly is pushing them where they want to go. But it's so antithetical to the old school ways of hockey and the way it was done forever. It's interesting to see that give and take going on.
This is a baseball term, but do they do show and goes in the NHL, like on a Sunday afternoon, like where
they always do show and goes.
Okay.
They like immediately leave after the game is over.
No, I mean, do they have days where they don't skate in the morning? They just go right to the rink and play?
Yes. Yeah. That is something they call that an optional practice in the morning. And then they'll skip it. And you know what's funny is like there's a trend now where they're like a lot of people are asking if the morning skate's even something that's necessary. And there's talk of getting rid of it altogether and whether it still serves a purpose. And like a lot of players, especially older players, they like to go in the morning, skate. It's like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and then go back and they play that night. But, as the season wears on, you see a lot of morning skates before games get canceled. You'll see optionals where only guys that aren't playing will show up and skate, and the guys that are actually playing won't be there. And you do see that a lot more, especially when the schedule gets tight. You'll see you'll see morning skates get canceled. You can basically bank on if the Bruins are playing back-to-back that the morning skate after the game the night before is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it all depends on like the schedule, the circumstances. But like there was also, I think, a really good understanding between Bergeron, Chara, Mark Recchi when he was with the Bruins, and Claude. They had this really good relationship where Claude would go to Chara and Recchi and say, do you guys need to skate? Should we give you the day off? And he would gauge what was going on in the dressing room and how the players were doing energy level wise and, all of that. He would gauge it with his leaders and the veteran guys in there. They were almost like coaches on the ice to get feedback from them on whether they should practice or not. It's funny. I had Aaron Ward on a podcast I was doing, and he was on those Bruins teams back then, right before they won the Cup. Great defenseman, hard-nosed guy. And he was telling the story about how in Buffalo, and this was early in Claude's coaching tenure, Claude didn't like the way that they were playing, and I think he was trying to invoke a curfew and then an early morning skate the next morning. And basically Chara stood up on the back of the bus and said, we have plans to go out tonight. There's a fight going on. I think it was a pay-per-view boxing match or something like that. We're all getting together and watching the fight. He said, we're not staying in tonight. We're not going to observe a curfew, and we're not skating early in the morning. And that was basically Chara like throwing down the gauntlet early in Claude's career. Like, you better pull back the reins a little bit and give us a little leeway. Yeah. And, as the captain, him doing that, he obviously earned the respect of all of his players. But it was, that's the stuff you don't hear about at the time. But it's the tug and pull between established superstar players, veteran guys, and coaches, trying to keep the attention of everybody and walking that line between discipline, between getting the most out of them, but also like, not creating a mutiny among the players.
Yeah. How great is Chara? I mean, what he's done in his career. We're so blessed to have him play here for considering his age.
Yeah, he's a marvel. And, who knows what's going to happen now? He's 43. He's not signed. His agent has told us at Boston Hockey Now that he's just waiting to see what kind of season format they have for the NHL. I think if it turned into a bubble situation, like for the playoffs where he was isolated away from his family, and where he wouldn't be with them for weeks at a time or months at a time, that he probably wasn't going to play. He's got young kids. I don't think he wants to be away from them like he was
Yeah.
over the summer when they played in the bubble in Toronto due to COVID-19. So I think it's all going to depend on that. But it's interesting. I obviously he's a Hall of Famer. He's so important to the identity of the Bruins over the last 15 years. The best shutdown defenseman of his generation. I think he could continue playing for a couple of years as a penalty kill specialist, as a guy that plays late in games protecting leads, as a third defenseman that still plays heavy minutes, but plays more like 15, 16 minutes a night than 20, 21 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And I think for him, like he has this thing in his head. It's almost like a Tom Brady thing where he thinks he can defy Father Time, and he wants to see how long he can do it. And he's such a conditioning health nut that I think he wants to see if, he can play until a really advanced age and, maybe break Gordie Howe's longevity records in the NHL. He's got a chance to do stuff like that. It's been a pleasure to watch him. He's a legendary player, tallest player ever in the league. Exactly who he is every time he's on the ice. It's been like that for his entire career. One of the most feared players ever. And to see his work ethic, to see what he brings every day, to see the leader that he's been, and even, he's become a lot more comfortable with who he is and what he's about, and talking more about his personal life. And I remember when he first got to Boston, he was very sort of like closed off and, wouldn't want to tell you about like books he was reading, wouldn't want to tell you about stuff he was doing off the ice. And it was like all business. And I think as he's grown, as he's got married, had kids, as he's really, matured, he's become much more open to just letting like he can speak 7, 8 languages. He's got a real estate license and he owns property all over the world. Like, he's an incredibly intelligent guy in addition to being a very fearsome guy on the ice. And he's got a ton of interests in things that he's into. And he's, a guy that likes to improve all the time at everything that he does. So, it's been fascinating to get to him as the player off the ice and the player on the ice. I'll never forget interviewing his dad, who has never come over to the United States or North America to watch Zdeno Chara play.
Wow.
Never, ever. He's in Slovakia. He's in Eastern Europe. He was a Olympic wrestling coach, like Greco-Roman wrestling in like the 60s or 70s. Talking to him about Chara, his dad, when they were over there for the Premier Games in Prague back in 2010. And it's funny, his dad is about my height, my size, just a barrel-chested guy. And I remember thinking the first time I met him, it's unmistakable. His face is just like Zdeno's. But I was like, where the heck did all of that height come from? Because this guy looks like a bear, and Chara's just such a tall, lean, fearsome guy. It's amazing.
That's funny. Yeah, what a story. What is hockey guys are different, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Do you think they're more appreciative of, or maybe them becoming pros is not I don't want to say not as big a deal to them, but they've played hockey, some of them since they were 3 or 4. It just seems like a natural progression in their life. And I don't know. It just seems like they're different pros.
They are, and I think it's ingrained in them from a young age. And this is just a culture thing in hockey that, A, you love the game, B, you play hard, C, you play for your team. Like, there's a lot of lip service played to that in other sports.
Yeah, you're right.
But you and I know there's a selfish aspect to baseball. It's a very individual sport in some ways.
Yep.
And that it's not like that in hockey. And like there is a sort of a beating down of the individual and attaining the individual goals from the time you're young all the way through the system. There's a culture that says, no, it's about the team. You never draw attention to yourself. That's why you don't see a lot of crazy goal scoring celebrations. That's why you don't see a lot of demonstrative stuff going on the ice. Some players will do it, but there's not a lot. And they seem to get a lot of negative attention heaped on them when they do make a spectacle of themselves on the ice. And it's good and bad, right? Like it's good in the aspect of it teaches you to play the right way, respect your teammates, respect your opponents, like good sportsmanship, all that, the handshake line after the playoff series is over. Like there's some great aspects to it, but it also does take some of the personality out of the game, take some of the marketability out of the game, where you don't have like superstars doing crazy things and drawing attention to themselves like you do in some of the other sports where become kind of household names for as much the way they celebrate or the way they act as they do what they're actually doing on the field or on the ice. So there's, pluses and minuses to it, but like, there's no question, my opinion, I've covered Red Sox games. I've covered Celtics games. I've covered Patriots games and Bruins games. I think the hockey players are the best to deal with. I think they're the most down to earth. I think they're the most hardworking and respectful. They're the easiest to talk to. Like I found in baseball, you had to like jump through hoops to get players to do anything for you. And it was really difficult to build a relationship with them. They're very closed off. They viewed the media oftentimes the enemy rather than somebody that was, a coworker. Yep. It's not like that in baseball at all. I mean, in hockey at all. You do develop relationships with those guys and you develop some admiration for them. Maybe some of it is because they're Canadian, a lot of them, and they're just brought up that way. I think a lot of it has to do with the culture of hockey and doing everything the right way. And they're sort of brought up that way. And, it's just, life quality wise, it was no brainer for me that I wanted to cover hockey full time rather than baseball if I had a choice between the two, because it is a pleasure going into the dressing room. And part of it too is the Bruins have Patrice Bergeron, who's a fantastic human being on and off the ice, just a quality person. And I've covered the Bruins since his first day with the Bruins organization in 2003. And he's always been a fantastic individual and, somebody you would want your son to grow up like, or your daughter to marry. He's that kind of guy. Zdeno Chara, quality human being. Brad Marchand, I have a great relationship with him. And he's not like he is on the ice when he's off the ice. He's very accountable. And he was a beneficiary of being a rookie back in 2011, where there were guys like Mark Recchi, Sean Thornton, Andrew Ferentz, Johnny Boychuk, great veteran guys that kind of showed him the way when he was a young kid. And now he's passing that on to other players. Milan Lucic was a fantastic guy. The Bruins had a very unique dressing room that was welcoming to all and, is very respectful of all and is not very like a 180-degree dynamic from what it could be like covering the Red Sox at times. And it wasn't horrible covering the Red Sox, right? But those 03, 04, 05 teams, the individuals that were on those teams were amazing. Johnny Damon's one of the nicest guys that I've ever interacted with.
Yeah.
And he was phenomenal to talk to every day. Kevin Millar was a great guy. Pedro, like I covered him for a couple of years, terrific guy. The Pedro, part of the time I covered him was also those weeks and months where he got mad at the media for reporting something and he wasn't talking to us. He would leave handwritten notes for us about his thoughts about the game after it was over. Wow. I'll never forget in Baltimore, he did that. Wow. He pitched. He left a note with Glenn Geffner, who was the PR guy at the time, after the game was over. And Geffner was outside of Tito's office, like reading the handwritten note that Pedro had left about his thoughts about the start because he just decided he didn't want to talk to us. Like the guys that were in that clubhouse at that time, I remember Derek Lowe with the entire like mental Gidget thing that he went off on when Johnny Miller was asking him how his head was after he'd had like a tough outing. I think it was a Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
And he just went off for like 10 minutes in the Red Sox clubhouse. Lowe's on one side going off after Johnny Miller asked him a question. You could hear Johnny Damon and Nomar on the other side of the clubhouse going, "Don't do it, Derek. Don't do it, D'Lo. Stop talking." They were trying to like get him to stop what he was doing, but he was like a runaway train at that point, and he was just going off. Like Manny would do different stuff every single day, like crazy stuff. You had those teams were super fun to cover because when you went into the Red Sox clubhouse every day with all those personalities, the idiots, you had no idea what you were walking into. Yeah. Like there was entire crazy situations pretty much every day you were walking into that were a story among themselves. And, those were fun to cover. But like, I think I realized 2010, 2011, 2012, like it was never going to be like that again. Those Red Sox teams and those personalities and what was there then, it was never going to be like that. And there was never going to be like a height that the Red Sox were at importance-wise pre-2004 and right afterwards, or the character and personality of those players that were there at that time that made it such a fun era to cover the team.
Yeah. And I always say this, Dan Duquette always gets lost in all of that, but no one realizes that he made, I'm not just saying a Red Sox history, but he made some of the best trades ever. I mean, he got Pedro Martinez.
Yep.
Think of that. He signed Manny. He signed Damon.
Manny. Yep.
Traded for he drafted John Lester, but I mean, some of the Veritek, he built that core. It's pretty amazing what he did, but
that Heathcliff Slocum trade for Derek Lowe and Veritek is one of the great trades of all time.
Yeah. I mean, even getting Pedro, right?
Yep.
They gave up Carl Pavano and then it was Tony Armas Jr. I mean, for one of the best pitchers that you could argue ever. I mean, he's in that conversation. So
for sure. And I mean, And there were some great moves afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The Mike Portillo year where they got Ortiz on waivers.
Yeah.
And he was part of that. Ortiz, Millar, Bill Miller, who was the Jeremy Giambi, all those guys that they
Yes.
threw at the first base, DH, third base kind of thing, figuring
Filler
out what
guys,
they were going to do.
Yeah.
And they just threw a bunch of names out there and saw who was going to perform. And Ortiz ended up like exploding into that was the backbone of that team. As much as it was the pitching, it was all about Manny and Ortiz being 3-4 in that hitting lineup.
Yep.
That was behind every bit of greatness that those Red Sox teams achieved.
Yeah. I talk to pitchers a lot. I mean, you have guys in that lineup those are the oh crap guys, like, so what's happening with the winter sports? I mean, I saw some things on the website that you write for that Fenway might be a potential. Are we going to have no fans, you think, to start?
I think to start, yes.
Yeah.
I think
it's a state thing too, right? I mean, the state.
It's every state.
Every state. Yeah.
And there are guidelines that are different for every state. I think to start, you're likely to see no fans in all of the games. And then I think the hope that the NHL has is that as the season goes along, maybe they can start to have fans in the stands. And by playoffs, which I think they're anticipating is probably going to be May, June, July, that they will have fans in the stands, at least to some capacity. By that point, the vaccine will have been in play for, at least a few months, if not more. You talk to some experts who think April, May, we may start to feel a little more normal, like hopefully fingers crossed on that one. Right.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, but I think their hope is the league's hope is that as the season progresses, you'll start to see some percentage of fans back in the stands. And like the problem with the NHL and a lot of what's going on right now is that their TV deal is not as good as the other three big sports, to where the other three, I think, can survive without no fans because of the TV deal.
Yeah.
The NHL is still gate driven and revenue driven, and they need ticket sales in order for franchises to survive. And, so there needs some assurance of at some point fans will be allowed back in the building, allowed to start buying tickets. I think, talking about playing games at Fenway is a way to maybe get some games with fans before you would be allowed to indoors. And I think that's why some teams are exploring it, like the Bruins, and they definitely are. Looking at Fenway, I thought Harvard Stadium would make sense too, to potentially look at that. Maybe the infrastructure's not there to do it for NHL games. I don't know, but I think it's a way of outside the box thinking for some NHL teams to get some revenue for at least a handful of games in the early months when otherwise they're not getting anything. Because, for a team like the Bruins, Delaware North is their parent company. That's a company that does arena concessions and event concessions, and they're getting killed right now because, there's no concerts, there's no sporting events, there's no fans, and so there's no concessions. And, that I think that's affecting everything along their business model, including the Bruins. But I think a lot of the teams are looking for ways that they can get some money, including the negotiations going on with the players for deferring more of the money later on down the line, maybe having a bigger escrow and the players giving up more money. I think it's eventually going to get figured out, because I think the players and the owners realize they can't kill a whole season. Because of it, they've got to continue it going and continue the momentum going. And if they skip a season, it could do irreparable damage to the NHL. So I think they'll eventually figure out the money and figure out a way to do it. But, like I said, I think it's much more of a consideration bottom line wise in the NHL than in the other sports, because I think I think they get roughly $50 million a team for the TV deals that they have.
Okay.
And they're estimating it's going to cost $150 million per team, just in cost for salaries, travel, like all the stuff that they're going to have to do for a regular season and the playoffs. It made sense to just do it for 2 months in a bubble with no fans last summer because it was only 2 months and they could withstand that economically. I think trying to crack $150 million nut for each of those teams to have a full season and playoff with no fans, it's just not going to work. So they're trying to figure out ways to get fans in the stands until the government, the municipal governments for each state decides they can go in and have fans.
Yeah, I think that people are learning, maybe the general person can have some extra income laying around if they get laid off.
Yeah.
But I think and I could be wrong on this, but I don't know if a lot of owners have all these giant gobs of money just laying around, because they're playing with a little bit bigger hands here. Like I say, they're at the casino with playing. They're not playing $5 hands. They're playing $5,000 hands. When they lose money, they're losing. I mean, it's insane money. So like, I know people don't like to talk about sports affecting our economy, but there's so many facets and levels. You brought up the concessions, but think about how many levels this affects.
Yep.
It's a lot of people, and these owners don't have all this cash reserve, do they?
No, and it's coming in from every business. Like every business is affected by this. If you're not Jeff Bezos owning Amazon,
Sure.
You're hurting. There's only a handful. Like if you're one of the streaming companies, Netflix is doing really well because everybody's home and has to basically all they can do is watch stuff on TV. Same with Amazon. Everybody's getting stuff shipped to them. There's companies like that are making money. But if you're not one of them, you're not making money. You're losing millions upon millions of dollars. And you've definitely seen it with Delaware North and with Jeremy Jacobs. Like he's a billionaire, obviously, but you're not getting any money coming in, and you're still paying out like to this company that you're running, and go across the board with all these other sports and all these other owners. Like I'm not going to cry for them because they're billionaires, but like they're definitely in a spot where like at the end of the day, like professional sports is not a civic thing. You know what I mean? It's a business. And if they're going to lose $100 million, they're not going to do it. It's not a business that's not going to happen until things are back to normal. And that calculus just isn't going to work for the professional sports team. So it is difficult. And you and I both know it. We're living through it too. We're dependent on sports jobs, and you see things change over the last few months in the landscape, because of the way things are going. And we just have to keep our fingers crossed that we grind it out for another 6 months here, and that by May, June, things are going to be a lot better, and we're going to be in a position where everything's opening up and things are getting back to normal. But I do think, just based on the way things have gone for the last year almost, it's going to take a while to completely dig out of this fully and to be back at full strength economy wise and job wise and everything else. So we'll see where it goes. Oh, we got a little Christmas cheer going on here.
All right.
Hey, you want to say hi?
Hey.
All right, buddy. All right, buddy. Go ahead. I got to finish, pal.
Yeah. I love the break-ins. This is great. Yeah.
Yeah, you love the remote learning?
Oh, yeah.
Hold on 1 sec. All right, you go. No way! Come on. Hey, I want to know what device is like. Come on. I want to know what device is like. Let's go. I'll be wrapping up.
Yep, I'm almost done, and I'll cut this out. Yeah. That's great. Well,
I love the remote learning.
Yeah. My sister's got 2 girls, so yeah. Thanks for doing this, Joe.
You got it, Mike.